Oh no, the music. I forgot the music. We're live and I forgot the music. Oh no. Oh no, what a mess. We're 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late. Yeah, so I'm just going to turn it off. This was a terrible disaster. All right. Hello. Welcome in, everybody. Make sure you can hear us okay. Make sure you can see us okay. A lot to talk about today on this Friday edition of our community forum. Thank you very much. Yeah, Farzad's usually on time, maybe having some issues. I'm just a mess today. That's really what it came down to. But I appreciate you guys for waiting. Yeah, real quick, if you guys don't mind on the panel, we'll start doing this as well because we are gaining a larger audience. We'll go around the clock, just a brief introduction, and then we'll start with TeslaBot today. TeslaBot, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm also known as Borghand. I'm an attorney, and as long as I get oil and screwed, I'm fine.
Perfect. Hans, go for it.
I'm not sure that I want to follow that one. My name is Hans Nelson. I am a mechanical engineer. I've been a Tesla investor since I think 2017, 2018, somewhere back in there. I've been following Elon Musk since I read Tim Urban's Wait But Why series, and just really deep down the rabbit hole by this time. Pretty much everything between Neuralink, Boring Company, Tesla, SpaceX, and now Twitter. Yeah, love researching and then discussing.
Awesome. Jared, go for it.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate everything Hans said, basically. And then I worked at Tesla in 16 and 17 part-time when I was in college.
Woo, woo, woo.
Nice.
Tesla crew. Farzad, and I'm a running back for Penn State. Okay, so let's kick off with some notes. For those that don't know, Penn State, every time they play on the weekend, I got to wear the jersey of whatever, if they're away or home, so that they win. And last time it didn't work, so I'm going to keep doing it anyway. All right, so let's kick off with the Ron Barron, Elon Musk chat that just happened. This is kind of like quote unquote breaking news, if you want to call it. I don't think anyone on the panel has had a chance to watch it yet because it was kind of last minute, but I did catch most of it. And I wanted to lead off with the notes, use those notes as a way to sort of kick off our conversation. A lot of the sort of topics overlapped. And in the comment section as well, as we go through the conversation, please drop your comments about what you think, maybe ask some questions, and I'll try my best to monitor the chat just like I am now. Farzad, where are the women? I agree. If we got to get some women on this panel, we need more diversity here. So I appreciate you, Mimi. Maybe one of these days we'll have you on. Who knows? Join Patreon. All right. Here are the notes. What's up?
You got to send the invite to Mary Barr.
Say that one more time.
Send the invite to Mary.
Yeah, I should. Mary Barra. Yeah. Mary, if you have the guts, we would love to have you on.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So here are the notes, my high-level notes from the Ron Barron discussion, and then we'll take it from there. I came in at the SpaceX sort of, I couldn't tell if they were in the middle or towards the end, but Barron was asking about how anyone can compete with SpaceX and how competitors can still get funded. And really, Elon led off with saying, this is just a vertical integration problem. We have to be really good at ensuring that you have to be perfect in building these rockets to make sure reusability is possible. And your reusability is by far the most important thing. And then he sort of dropped the nugget and said, well, I have to be careful what I say because I've already made so many enemies, And then something else he said was that I wish less companies wanted me to die. Something along those points, kind of in a gesturing manner, but it was kind of, I think, in the front of his mind, especially with the Twitter stuff that's going on. So that was fascinating. He made a statement that Twitter will aim to be the largest financial institution, the most valuable financial institution in the world. Twitter Blue will aim to be sort of a method where the $8 a month acts as a way to make crime very expensive. So the thought process is if you're a Twitter Blue person, your replies come to the top, and then everybody else kind of flows through from there. Blue will be prioritized. And the other sort of analogy he uses, if you're somebody who has a bot farm right now, it's basically free to create bots. You can get a algorithm to spit out a million bots and it doesn't cost you a thing. If you make Twitter $8 a month to sign up, all of a sudden, if you want an account that's going to get most of the attention because of how it's going to be prioritized, then you have to pay $8 a month per account. So it's kind of making crime very, very expensive. That's sort of the reasoning that was given. I'm not saying I agree or disagree, just kind of painting the picture of what was said. So it's, in that sense, it's try to purify the service in that sense. Activist groups try to hijack Twitter, losing a lot of revenue, feels that it's messed up, and an attack on the First Amendment. So this was sort of a conversation around how when he took over the company, a lot of these advertisers have been sort of reserving their ability to advertise on the platform because apparently activist groups are out there persuading these companies that they shouldn't advertise on Twitter, and I guess they haven't, and Elon feels like that's very messed up. He actually shared a tweet on this not too long ago, if I'm not mistaken. Let me pull it up on our screen real quick so that we can go through that. Just because it's on topic. Here we go. Present, share screen. Here we go. Twitter has had a massive drop in revenue due to activist groups pressuring advertisers, even though nothing has changed with content moderation, and we did everything we could to appease the activists. Extremely messed up. They're trying to destroy free speech in America. Pretty strong words, if I say so myself, but it was discussed on that Ron Barron panel. He's currently working 120 hours a week, 110 to 120 hours a week. He feels like it's needed because, that's just the state of business. Got to get Twitter up and running. However, he does think over time, Twitter will be easier to manage than Tesla or SpaceX. And he's working on putting together a group here in the next, call it, few weeks to take over the company. But until then, he said that it's necessary. If you follow Elon for a long time, he feels like he doesn't care about pain. He just does what he thinks needs to be done. Screw his health, I guess, is how he thinks. So quite wild. On the topic of Tesla got too big for logistics. That's why Q3 got some criticism. However, he thinks long-term this is good because you do want some deliveries in the pipeline, so you're not rushing to finish out quarters. We already kind of know this. And then there was a Q&A session at the end, only 2 questions, but this sort of like was a big takeaway for me. The first person asked, he framed the question this way: Mercedes is making EVs today, and it's trading at 6 times earnings. Tesla is trading at 70 times earnings. Why should I invest in Tesla? And then what in my head went to is like, okay, so Elon's having this conference talking to a bunch of potential investors, part of the Barron Group, a lot of folks that have a lot of money. And some of the statements he would make, people were like, yeah, clap. And I'm like, okay, this is stuff he's been saying for like God knows how long. So what opened my eyes again is that it still feels like this thing is very early and most people still don't understand what the hell is going on with this company. And then so when that question came up, he started talking about full self-driving and how that's going to be 5 times more valuable if you have a car and if you do a long-term sort of analysis on future cash flows. And you think about the Optimus, essentially it boggles the mind is sort of the things he keeps dropping. And it was just interesting sort of listening to the crowd react to that. So there's some notes. So whoever wants to go first, start sort of maybe dumping your brain on us, and then we can sort of go around the horn like we usually do. But who would like to who go first, either on these topics or whatever sort of sprung up in your mind? Go for it. I'll open the panel. Don't be shy.
I won't be bashful. Obviously, my father's health is very important, and I'm concerned that Elon take care of himself. And that is a great concern because that's that's the ultimate key man concern that we always hear about Tesla. And there was discussion about Twitter not basically taking Elon's attention, and obviously it is. So and I try to be, I might be a little bit more critical because of my background. So I'm generally kind of like looking at the flip side of most things. So the other thing is, in terms of, it's a free country, right? It's a private company, an activist group. If they don't want to use Twitter, I mean, that's kind of the flip side. The whole point of Twitter is it's free and people are free to make whatever decisions they want. That includes boycotting Twitter. And it's and I think the fact that he didn't anticipate the fact that he was going to get pushback and negative influence by outsiders is short-sighted. And one concern I always have about Elon is I find him to be impulsive. And he acts often, it appears to me, because he wants to do something without maybe reflecting upon all the ramifications. And if he didn't expect that if he acquired Twitter, he was going to get pushback, then he really did not think the transaction through. Ultimately, whether it's the other part was he has to distinguish between free speech and the business. He's claiming that the activist groups are impinging on free speech. They're just impinging on the business. He can run Twitter however he wants. He can make it much more open. And that has nothing to do with free speech. That just has to do with the business. And obviously, it's a questionable business deal at this point in time. I understand that. And if advertisers are leaving, it makes it a worse business deal. But I think his mindset is divided and probably looking at business as opposed to the First Amendment. I also think that I always thought one way I thought Twitter was lacking is there should be a disclaimer. When you open the site, it should basically say something to the effect, these are people's view. They may be full of shit. This may not be accurate. So take it as such and do your own due diligence. And I never seen any kind of suggestion. And I think if that was like prominent, if you didn't give everything 100% credence and you really put the onus on people to do their own work, that would make Twitter more effective. So those are kind of.
So you're saying that Tom Nash should write the disclaimer for Twitter? Might be inaccurate. Might be the rabblings of a madman.
Or his old grandfather. His grandfather maybe should write it.
Yeah. So my thoughts on the advertising portion, and especially like what's going on with advertisers pulling support for Twitter, is think about the quality of the return on ad spend that Twitter has and how garbage it is. And so who are the companies who are going to throw money at that? Well, it's obviously going to be big companies with large ad spend that they really don't care what their return on ad spend is. They're just like spreading around big amounts of advertising dollars and mostly trying to get some brand awareness. And they're like, sure, like we might as well spend some at Twitter. And thinking about GM specifically, you just gotta wonder like how much politics and that ad spend are intertwined together, because this is a company that is basically captured the Democratic Party. Their unions control what the White House does to a large degree, and we've seen that. And so if they feel like their political views are not going to have the same amount of freedom and control on the platform that they used to have, and we also control the advertising dollars that go into that platform, I'm not surprised, like Borkin mentioned, that this was pretty foreseeable, just based on the demographics of who the advertisers are going to be. And yeah, not surprised at all. That said, I think this is a short-term problem, and that the quality of the product as it improves, there's just so many low-hanging fruit here, and he's already started to, identify a lot of things. I love watching Elon go out on Twitter and gather feedback and get suggestions and start making plans for how they're going to improve the platform and the product. And I think all this will get sorted out. But yeah, it definitely was foreseeable.
Yeah, and the one thing I was taking away, the best thing in this was kind of how he was saying that his involvement and stuff like that with Twitter will gradually decrease. And building Twitter, how it will ideally like live in the future, he's building a system. And once you build the system correctly, it'll self-innovate with the creators that are on the space. as well as it'll take less involvement from him and his team. And I mean, the one thing is like everyone will react and say, "Oh, he's doing a lot more work than expected." You got to think though, where he is coming into Twitter versus where he's been coming into a lot of other situations. He had a team, he had a plan. This was months of litigation leading up to it. It's always been in the back of his mind and all of his immediate team around him that he's going to be taking over possibly someday, and this is how we're going to improve it. So, it's like, what else did you expect?
Yeah. I do think what's starting to fascinate me a lot is a lot of the conversations around Elon taking over Twitter and how this is going to become another attack vector towards sort of what he's been accomplishing and the different things that are like happening in his realm. I don't know if you guys agree with this, but I feel like the attention he's been getting in the media and everywhere else seems like it's at an all-time high to me. And I think we sort of, like we said, we expected it. It was part of the plan. But it's at the same time, I've sort of been scouring different media companies. I'm checking out Fox, CNN, MSNBC, Breaking Points, different blogs and whatever else. And I like to think of myself as very nonpartisan. I hope I'm just an ideas person. I like to just approach everything holistically. I'm going to try my best to not be biased into something. But it does appear like for the last week, this dude has been zeitgeist. Like it's just everything. Maybe it's just my bubble, but outside of Russia, Ukraine, and what's going on there, it's like Elon Twitter, Elon freedom of speech, Elon advertisers, and it's just so interesting to watch. It's kind of like he's dominated the tech space and sort of the electric vehicle space and the technology space for so long, and now he's sort of filtering into pop culture. Now it's becoming this transition where he's going from that to this now, and I'm trying to see how this is going to play out in the next, say, 2 to 4 weeks, or maybe even longer, to see what kind of dynamics appear. And within the realm of the advertising revenue and everything that's going on there, I do feel like if the blue checkmark thing becomes a success come Monday when it goes live, supposedly, it kind of creates this area where a lot of the great content actually starts appearing to the top and going to the top. I wonder if that's going to really change some of the narratives that we're hearing. And then if advertisers are like, well, okay, so this was successful and you were able to create a platform that's going to be super valuable for what really matters, if that's just going to change the equation, and then advertisers go on, they start spending their ad dollars, they start making a ton of money because their products are actually selling, and then the word gets spread around, and then before you know it, Twitter is the place where advertisers want to go, right? So that's kind of what pops up to my head as I think through this whole thing.
Yeah, I think, one thing just to, you were touching on this, but one thing to draw out a little bit more is with SpaceX and Tesla specifically, his exposure to both the broader public and politics was a lot lower. There's a lot of politics that were involved in SpaceX, but Gwynn pretty much handled that part of it. Like that happened in spite of Elon's political unsavviness, not because of it. And that really is thanks to Gwynn. And then with Tesla, pretty minimal. And then so there's like an isolated audience at first early on when the resistance to those products was super high. It's still a very small group of people. And now that he's delving into the realm of social media, like it's a much larger, broader audience. It is more worldwide. It's going to have a lot more attention. And the power structures that SpaceX and Tesla were coming up against were largely behind the scenes power structures. Americans aren't going about their daily lives thinking about Lockheed Martin, ULA, those types of things. And there are strong existing power structures that he was fighting against, but they were background. And then now he's wading right into the foreground. With Tesla, energy companies, oil companies, like these are also very powerful entities, but they're not front of mind for the average person. The average person is really thinking about social media. Now, whether Twitter is the thing that the average person is really talking about, but as far as in the internet world, Twitter is the zeitgeist. And so he is now at the center of, the most controversial thing. And so, yeah, it's also inevitable that this thing, it's progressing through a similar arc of pushback by a power center against an upstart and disruption. And so it's going through a similar cycle, but this is now a public front and center cycle as opposed to past ones where they were a little bit more in the periphery.
That's a fascinating point. Like the dude can't help but disrupt shit. That's really what it comes down to. Like he can't help it. I think that's just who he is. He just doesn't necessarily, I don't know if he doesn't care, but he just feels like that disruption itself is more important than how people will feel about it.
If you love humanity and you want the future for humanity to be better than the day that we have today, then the status quo is unacceptable.
Yeah.
And the thing is that how did we get to the status quo? Well, a lot of people worked really hard to make the world as good as it is today. And now they want to enjoy the benefits of having worked to make it as good as it is today. And we have this professional administrative class who their job is to preserve the status quo. And he says, no, that's not good enough. We need a better future. And so how do you do that? Well, you have to disrupt the professional administrative class.
And it's almost like the percentage. We've always had progress as a society. Sorry, Tesla bot, I'll let you go here in a second. We've had by the way, the comments on your getup is amazing. I'm just seeing a lot of action there. It's funny to follow. Shout out everybody in the stream, by the way, 516 folks. Thank you very much. Love you guys. I forgot the point I was going to make. Shit. Go ahead, Tesla bot. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think it's also the response of the population is also based on the macro. So the last 3 years, honestly, the last 3 years have been a shit show, and now the stock market is taking a dump. We're either in a recession or going into a recession. So people always look for a villain. There has to be somebody responsible for the plight of the world, and he is open and out front. So, and that's his personality, and he has no concerns about being that, but that makes him like the target. That's kind of the what. And on top of that, you add the fact that there's a huge mistrust of wealth in this country. So if you're super wealthy, most of the people think you're a scumbag. You stole your money, something, but it's a negative. Whatever the conclusion is, it's a negative. So he kind of fits all those kind of classes. If Tesla stock was at 500 today, he'd probably get less pushback. Be a lot more happy people. He'd be able to, it would, on its face, it would kind of substantiate his brilliance. When it's half that value, people are even more attacking of his character, etc. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Good, Jared.
Yeah, I mean, Tesla's very legit nowadays too. We can't forget that. Is like, if something like this were to happen, maybe 5 years ago, back then Elon would say like Tesla might fail and I might lose all my money. He would often say that. And now it's like, okay, we have this billionaire and he's solidified as a billionaire. Whether Tesla fails, SpaceX fails, like he would take a lot for him to be a poor man these days. So his influence on the world is only going to keep getting bigger for the short term. So I think that's also what keeps him, front page on media these days.
Yeah. I remember what I was going to say. The thing that's fascinating to watch is human beings have always had progress. It seems like from the beginning of time, we've always progressed, but what percentage of the population was actually disrupting to be able to make those advancements? Because you can't advance unless you disrupt, right? So the percentage of the population that's being disrupted up through, call it the sort of last 10 years of this Elon Musk figure coming in and disrupting some stuff much bigger than folks before him, one could argue, is maybe 1% of the population was disrupting. Maybe 0.5% of the population was disrupting. It's almost like we're increasing the percentage of the population that's either disrupting or being disrupted. And that in itself is what's, I feel like, causing a lot of this sort of weird time that we're in right now, because there's clearly somebody who's trying to push stuff forward in trying to maximize the number of people that he feels like would benefit from pushing stuff forward. And that has to be, to me, in my head, the underpinning as to why so many people, to Borghan's point, why so many people are upset. It's because the percentage of folks that are being disrupted and the percentage of folks that are disrupting has increased from previous times. And it's so weird. It's such a weird time. I don't know.
I honestly don't know if it's the percentage of people disrupting. Definitely the percentage of people being disrupted. I think it's more the power and speed with which the disruption is occurring, enabled by technology. Like, listening to James and Dave talk about Tesla Bot the other day, and just thinking more and more about Tesla Bot and where that's going, and just how fast the field of AI is progressing. Like, it's pretty hard to extrapolate out very far and feel like you have a good understanding of where this is going to go, because the things that we expect to happen, like everyone expected AI to disrupt like accountants and doctors and things before artists. Like, art was supposed to be the hard thing that was the human thing that AI was never going to be able to touch. Well, all of a sudden we've got all this technology and Stable Diffusion and Dolly and all the things that we're seeing, that's like, that was not supposed to be what AI was supposed to be effective at. And so it's like the exact trajectory of where AI is going is hard to pin down. And then also the speed with which it's just like, to go from ImageNet in 2012 to where we're at today in 2022 is insane. And that's just like the early base of an exponential curve that's about to go insane. And so, yeah, like that disruption, or the way that fuels disruption, and the amount of things that can be disrupted and the magnitude to which they can be disrupted. Like, we've just never seen anything like this in human history. And
yeah, but it's not, it doesn't seem like it's disruption for disruption's sake, though. And I think that's the separation here, right? It's like, so in the example of SpaceX, everything's getting heavily disrupted because there's now a solution that's making space travel orders of magnitude cheaper. The cars getting disrupted because now you have a vehicle that amassed this sort of rabid fan base, ourselves included, I would say, that are inspired by what that product means and what the future means. It's an improvement. It's an improvement to that. So I think what's interesting to think about is, as that disruption continues, how will Elon and his teams continue the trend of absolute disruption for the improvement of, sort of, call it, mankind in some way? And how can they maximize the number of people that feel the positive results of that disruption? Because the key thing about disruption is that it's super uncomfortable. And it's hard. It's hard to live through. I mean, look at today. My God, what's the byproduct of Twitter's disruption? Half the staff got laid off. That sucks. Like, from a human perspective, that's shit. Like, that's 3,700 people that maybe wanted to be there, regardless of the political belief or where they come from. That's 3,700 people that in a way have suffered emotionally, financially, in some way. Maybe some of them are happy that they were let go. Who cares? But there was some sort of byproduct from that disruption. But if, say, in the next 5 years, Twitter is able to turn into this thing that's actually positively benefiting people, or positively benefiting humanity in the same way, call it, SpaceX and Tesla have done, then I'm curious to see if more people will sort of shift their mindset from, ooh, bad billionaire, too much money, he's out there just being greedy, to, wow, okay, so I can see what he's trying to do. And I'm going to be more comfortable living through the uncomfortable sort of moment of disruption, and so on and so forth. And maybe that's me just being too optimistic, but yeah. it's a fascinating sort of thing that I'm thinking through. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to just mention one thing about why he's targeted, and how it influences. We're talking about disruption. I think he's targeted partly just strictly on a financial basis by short sellers. So, and they do it to all stocks. And I was following an Alzheimer's drug stock, and it was running a different kind of model than the other drug companies. And every so often you'd see like some report that would come out that would completely cripple the stock. And it was clear that the bigger pharmaceutical companies were either encouraging, paying for, whatever. And it was a way of disrupting that company's ability to go forward. And I'm sure with Tesla, it's the same thing. I see news, and the way I see it is I see news reports that I saw 6 months ago, and it's redone on some new wire service. Like somebody's just kind of repeating the same story. The company that I was following that had been targeted, what they did is yesterday they filed a lawsuit in federal court against all those shorts. It was like 1,000 different entities, but they filed it against all those short sellers to kind of keep them in check. Whether they're going to get anything or not, who knows? But it might be a method of kind of, silencing them or suppressing them. But I really think that's an element. I would assume that Legacy Auto is not unhappy when they see negative stories about Elon. And would I be surprised if Mary Barra didn't have somebody on staff, PR, who was making sure that all those stories go out? I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah, I do appreciate people, at least pushing back on the short sellers and creating some friction. It kind of goes back to the, bots being free. Like if the SEC doesn't do anything to curb short sellers doing coordinated attacks, or individual companies or groups don't push back and make it at least more expensive for them, then we'll see that type of behavior get more out of hand. So yeah, I appreciate anyone who's like, short selling is an important thing, but it also needs to be kept balanced and in check.
Yeah, fascinating to watch. There was a comment where somebody said this is going to be a controversial statement, but I'm going to make it anyway. Somebody said that Elon has to kind of stay away from politics and so on and so forth. I find that sort of viewpoint, with all due respect, sort of weird, because if no one talks about politics, then politics will destroy nations, states, in my opinion. Because that's just what happens. If you allow the few to have the conversations to dominate society, then over time, the few will just do what benefits them. And that's just human nature. Like literally follow anything you've ever been a part of where a group of people have sat down to do things. If they go unchecked, like literally every corporation in the history of mankind, what happens in the long term? It just exists to make investors money. That's all it does, because that's what humans do. And so if you don't have a population that's willing to question and fight against what the power is doing, then the end game is obvious, right? So I don't buy this, and I get it's not good for Tesla stock. It increases risk. I get it. But I just wish more people were comfortable talking about politics, honestly, because I think in the end, that's what really helps societies grow. Is if all of us had a conversation about what's going on truly, then I think we'll be better off. Anyway, off my soapbox. Sorry, it just sort of triggered a thing in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that Elon is this polarizing figure, and obviously it's easy to make the analogies with President Trump of him being this very polarizing figure. But the other thing that happened this week was obviously the AOC banter and the beef between them on Twitter, which it's very.
What are you talking about?
This was definitely one of the top weeks on Twitter for Elon. But going into politics, it was kind of interesting because no matter what side you're on, I think I saw some interesting dialogue happening in the replies, because obviously Elon and his fan base is coming from one side, AOC and her fan base is coming from one side. Excuse me. But there was a lot of commentary going on about unionized workers and stuff in their reply. So obviously we're living in the old regime of Twitter. But I think there's a foundation of people who are there that are interested in talking about different points and stuff like that. So, plays a big role in future of Twitter.
We're disrupting how people talk to each other. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the uncomfortable nature of politics in itself. Like, it's being disrupted. Why can't we all talk about politics? Why can't we sit down and have a conversation about how we should be doing stuff? This is what's getting disrupted. This is what I'm talking about. Like, this sucks. It's uncomfortable, but you have to do it.
We definitely haven't figured out how to do that online in social media. Like, that's the thing. This is never, we used to be able to do this more as a country. And then as a society, but it happened face to face. It happened in different forms. And, it also kind of happened a lot in specific places where that was the focus. So hopefully we can figure out how to do that. And I think that's one of Elon's goals when he's saying preserving free speech. The reason that free speech is important is it is a mechanism to surface the highest signal information in a huge amount of noise. And it's very uncomfortable. And so, to maybe support the commenter earlier who was talking about that, I've felt the same way about so many celebrities. It's like, just act in the shows, act in the movies, and then I'll enjoy them. But then when you get up here and you start talking about politics, I'm like, shut up. I don't you're not qualified to speak on these topics. You have no idea what you're talking about, and you're so out of touch with reality. I don't really want to hear what you have to say. And so that was because they're voicing political opinions that were more opposed to the things that I believed. And maybe it's actually valuable for me to listen to those things. Now, on the flip side, okay, that's what these people are experiencing, is someone like, I would highly doubt that whoever it is that wants Elon to shut up has that same thought when they hear speeches at the Grammys or, the Emmy Awards or whatever, that are very, very political. And so then that becomes a mechanism. Maybe I should do some reflection. Why do I want Elon to shut up? And I don't care when other people talk politically. Oh, that's because I am actually sensitive to political conversation that challenges the things that I believe. And maybe if I actually want to grow and be a mature, robust person and have beliefs that I actually have conviction in, I need to be exposed to some of those things that I don't necessarily agree with. And that's just, something that a lot of people haven't had to do. And the way that our social media landscape is set up is really the way that the social media algorithms, they just want to feed you what you want to watch, and what you want to watch is what you already agree with. It creates these little bubbles and echo chambers, and we're all susceptible to it. So it's not necessarily that this is a weakness on individuals' part that is intentional. It's kind of a structural thing that maybe we need to be more intentional now to fight against that and expose ourselves to things that we don't agree with. And hopefully with the direction that Elon takes Twitter, people will be exposed to that a little bit more, and we'll at least get a swath of the population who really is interested in finding out the truth. And those people are going to be able to come together in a sort of online town square where they can do that together in a diverse landscape of ideas that really challenges them.
Mm-hmm. What I was going to say is that this is nothing new. I mean, I've always heard the statement, don't discuss religion and politics, right? That's if you go to like a dinner, you don't know somebody, don't raise religion and politics. So it's not new. What I think is different is there's a certain intimacy, just even in our conversation here. We see each other, we're speaking to each other.
I can't see you, bro.
It's much
I'm sorry, I see the bot.
No problem. It's much harder to call you a scumbag when I'm talking to you like this than when I just see like a line of words and I don't have a direct interaction with you. And that's something that definitely has changed over the past 30 years. There was nothing like that existed. If we all had to kind of have a intimate discussion, it would probably be more civil. And I think the lack of intimacy has caused, in a way, a lack of civility.
100%. I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast with Dr. Phil of all people. I've never seen a Dr. Phil show, but there was a interesting sort of experiment that was done where they took two people and they sat them down in a room with very opposing ideas, and they essentially said, okay, like you could like from the story, it sounded like these two had a lot of like aggression towards each other because of what they stood for, and these are the folks that would go online and sort of speak their mind on that, but being very aggressive towards the other side. They sat them down in a room and they forced them to look each other in the eyes for 10 minutes and not say a word. Just look each other in the eyes. Just look each other in the eyes for 10 minutes. And then after the experiment was done okay, so how do you feel? And then both people said, I did not realize there's a human being on the other side, right? So that goes directly to the point you just stated. So then my brain goes to how, like, could Twitter be the place where the humanity is shown first so that we can actually sit down and have a conversation? Because clearly human beings, we suck at this online thing. But it seems like when you introduce the humanity aspect of it, the guards come down. You see similarities on the other side. You're like, wow, this is another person. They have love, they have hate, they have sadness, they have sorrow, they have happiness, they have lust, they have passion, right? How is that even possible to do? Or am I thinking too far in advance? And do we not even need to do that in order to create sort of good discourse? Because it seems like that's what's missing. That's what's missing. It's the whole elevator thing. You go into an elevator when you're driving a car around and some idiot, or calling that person an idiot. If some idiot almost makes you crash, you're like, that son of a bitch. I hope, he gets into an accident. And then you're next to the elevator, next to the same person. You'd be like, hey, how you doing? You smell good. It's weird. It's so weird. It's so weird.
I think that speaks to the importance of the verification system and actually getting that right, because it's easy to hide behind a username, but once you're actually speaking to a person on Twitter, it's the dialogue.
Interesting. Didn't even think about that. So that blue check mark could very much like verify, hey, that's another person you're talking to here, bro. Like they're verified. Well, I don't know. But then over time, if everybody has a blue check mark, it just becomes like their profile picture.
Well, it does sound like he's going to be introducing some friction into misbehaving with the blue check mark, and so it will create a little bit of a different ecosystem of people who have the check mark interacting with each other, because there will be a higher level of expectations for the way that they're going to engage in the platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Let's shift topics to something more cheerful. Let's look at Tesla stock. Pew! Down 4%. See, I told you it was going to be more cheerful. What are you guys thinking? What do you guys think made this happen? I have a theory.
Mr. Powell, maybe Mr. Jerome. He was so negative in basically the 75 basis point raise was expected. And I often don't listen to Powell's news conference, but I did. And I was shocked how at every point he tried to indicate that we're not near the end of raising rates. And he's certainly not going to be premature at reducing rates. And I thought he was unbelievably hawkish. And I think the market turned on that.
It's funny because he was less hawkish than he's usually been, I thought. I think the conversation was kind of par for the course. Jared, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when you look at the NASDAQ, though, it's really Tesla that's getting hit hard today. And I bet it's just people digesting the interview this morning.
Mm-hmm. Hans, what do you think?
I think it's the Twitter overhang is beginning now.
So it's starting. It's not being lifted. It's beginning.
It's accelerating. Yeah. The more, for lack of a better word, the more bullshit Elon gets into with Twitter, I think the more that's going to impact Tesla stock, at least for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest headline for me was the 120 hours a week, and knowing that he's going to be that depleted with his mental energy and mental space to work on Tesla and stuff like that. As a short-term investor, you just would not want to hang on to the stock in the immediate term, knowing that that's where he's going to be devoted.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the the crowd that was saying, well, this is clearly going to be a distraction for Elon, can sort of use that exact thing to make the stock move in the way that they think it should move, you know? But I think some of the points that were made around it was clear, the verbiage at the meeting, I thought was that it was going to be temporary. Over time, Twitter is going to be easier to operate than SpaceX and Tesla. There's going to be a leadership group put in place at Twitter. That's probably Jason Calacanis sounds like is going to be or was it Jason or was it somebody else? I forget. But he's got a group that he's going to put in power, right? That is going to move Twitter forward. And then in the long term, it should be better. But I mean, I think this kind of gives a little bit of credence, I guess, to the fact that in the short term, at least Twitter is very much influencing what's going on in the market. If I compare it to the NASDAQ is down 1.7%, which is quite significant. It was up 1.3. It's now down 1.1. Tesla was up 3.4 and is now down 4.7. So that's a 7-point swing. And it does sort of correlate with when, so the speech finished right around this time, 10:45. And then since then, we've had a pretty severe sell-off. So yeah, interesting to watch. Definitely interesting to watch. What other topics? Go ahead, Hans. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I just think it's important for long-term Tesla investors to level set their expectations. And I know a lot of people have crapped all over Chicken Genius Ken for his $140 potential price target for Tesla. And I don't know that it'll get that low, but right now it would take an incredible amount of positive catalyst to be able to break through the macro market. And right now we just don't see, like, as far the macro market is in control, there are no positive catalysts coming in the near term future for the macro. And so I would not expect, if I was holding Tesla stock, to see the price stabilize or increase from here anytime between now and maybe the beginning of 2023. And like, that's I don't know that's going to happen. I could be wrong. Maybe some of the hedge funds and things who, now that Tesla does have investment grade, can come into the stock. Maybe they'll start coming in and raising. But, I think I wouldn't expect a stock buyback, and I wouldn't expect meaningful buying from hedge funds that soon. It just doesn't look like a time where people are going to run out and spend money on Tesla. And so, you just have to bake that in, that we could see another 20, 30, 40% drop, potentially even from current prices. And if you can't handle that, you need to make plans on how you need to best take care of your financial situation. Now, I think long term, this stock has incredible potential. And if you're approaching your investments from a Nassim Taleb barbell strategy, where you want minimum downside risk and maximum upside exposure, you can create a great investment strategy around Tesla. But you do have to understand and manage your downside exposure and your downside risk. And you have to be okay when some of those potential strategy or outcomes come into play. And so, yeah, I would not be surprised to see Tesla significantly below 200 over the next 3 months.
I was going to say that I think I'm sorry.
I was just going to say the price action today really speaks to our conversation we just came from, of Elon being this figure that, the more he's in the headlines, the more institutional money is going to trade off of the day-to-day activity. So, I mean, volatility over the next 3 months, I think, is just going to be insane as Twitter plays out.
I was going to say is what I heard. I don't know anything, but what I heard was kind of a lot of people saying that until Apple kind of crashes, we won't bottom. And Apple is starting, despite its had good earnings, but now since it's kind of backed off substantially from after earnings. And once kind of at least what I heard, once Apple kind of hits bottom, then the market's kind of bottomed, because Apple's going to be kind of the last one to go. And And the other side was kind of the thought process would be once, and I forgot the name of the agency, once the agency who calls when a recession occurs, once the agency calls a recession, we will be up from that point in time, because the Fed will then have to kind of re-strategize and will be looking to kind of aid the economy. And kind of, at least what else I heard in that regard is kind of we would bottom like 6 to 9 months before a recession. We can't have a recession at least for another quarter plus, because we're going to have a positive GDP this quarter. So we might be looking like 6 months till we actually really hit bottom. But that's kind of pure guesswork. But we're obviously subject to the macro like everybody else.
Yeah, I think looking at Apple's chart today of 2.86 down actually doesn't, if I compare this to Tesla real quick, so if I add a comparison and add Tesla in, I want to see line size big. Let's make it red because Tesla's logo is red. Yeah, so let's do a 1-day chart here real quick. Yeah, so it is, Tesla was up significantly above Apple, and now it's significantly lower than Apple. But Apple still has had quite a drastic move down here, down 2.75% for the day. So it's interesting. Again, I get reminded just how much the market is pricing in future likelihoods. And the market is just that. It's everyone's money where they think the economy or that company is going to be in the next 3 to 6 months. That's all it is. And if the next 3 to 6 months changes and they perceive that it's going to be different, then it starts going up. And that's why when the stock market actually goes up through the bottom of a recession, because the market is now voting with confidence that the future past that recession, or worse yet, depression, will be positive. And that's how the market works. It's pricing in future sort of results, but the biggest difference is that how long people expect that to change, right? Folks that are in for 3, 5, not financial advice, 3, 5, 10 years in advance are going to vote very differently in the market versus somebody that's in 6 months. And that's how you have these ebbs and flows that go on in the markets. And that's why you have some companies outperforming others in the indices and so on and so forth.
We have a lot of really savvy investors that know this and understand this, but it's important to just hone in on the fact that those people with the short-term time horizons, they're the ones making the trades daily. They're the ones doing the buying and selling. And so that's why the short term has such volatility, is because today's stock price is determined by the people who care about the stock price today, not tomorrow, not 6 months down the road, not 10 months down the road. And so that's why Warren Buffett's saying that in the short term, the stock market is a voting machine. In the long term, it's a weighing machine. That over the long term investors have the power of, do we believe in the stock? And we're not selling it until it reaches, these price targets. That works over the long period. But today, tomorrow, this month, next month, that's much more in the hands of the people who are short-term volatility traders.
Yeah. And I always find it fascinating how over the long term, I think buy it and forget it on companies that are clearly going to have a bright future, or have a high likelihood of a bright future, is such a tried and good strategy, but it's so damn hard to do, because I think as a species, we tend to overexpose ourselves to the things that are likely to have a good outcome. And then when the short term is not reacting the way we thought the long term, when the short term is not acting in the same way that we think the long term is going to act, then we start freaking out. And it's a question of overexposure. And again, I am not a financial expert. I am not a financial advisor, but for me as an investor, that's been by far the biggest lesson I've learned, is that the reason why you would be sad or upset about a company going down in the short term is because you're probably overexposed. You probably have too much money in that thing. Yeah, and I just wanted to throw that out there because I've battled with that in the past. You know, like I've put too much in Tesla back in the day, and I was trying to do options and calls, and I was trying to, oh my God, it's going to go up like crazy. And then the couple of days it didn't, I got burned hardcore. I'm like, okay, I need to learn from something because I can't be doing this. Like this is crazy stuff. So no,
and it's not how much money you have at risk as far as exposure. It's how much psychological value you have at risk. Like if you perceive this little bit of money as being super important and you better not lose any of it, then you will you'll trade it in a way that is very subject to your emotions. If you don't have a whole lot of emotional energy tied up in the outcome of whatever this amount of assets is, then you can ride out that storm in the way that most people can't.
Yeah.
On the positive side, the optimistic side is the recession's already priced in. So, even though we may go take a dump, the economy may take a dump, the stock market may go the opposite direction. And that's kind of like counterintuitive to all of us, but that would be, very helpful. The other thing is I always think is it's a great experience to go through a terrible market, because it's not going to be the only terrible market we're going to go through. And you kind of build up calluses. You see that you can make it to the other side, notwithstanding whatever the circumstances are. So it sucks going through it, but once you go through it, you could survive.
I really, really loved the point. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name right now, but the guest that Dave had on, who he retired on his Tesla stock.
Jason?
Gosh, I follow him on yes, Jason DeBolt. He's
Shout
like,
out Jason DeBolt.
I own the same amount of production. So he thinks about his stock in Tesla Tesla has however many minutes there are in a year worth of production. And Jason says, I own 8 minutes per year of Tesla production. And it doesn't matter what the stock price is today or tomorrow. I still own 8 minutes of Tesla production. And if I'm thinking about what this company is going to do over the long term, like in 2030, 8 minutes of Tesla production is going to be way more valuable than 8 minutes of Tesla production in 2022. And that's on track. That's unchanged. And if my investment thesis is centered around what is the value of 8 minutes worth of Tesla production in 2030, then I don't care if the stock price today is 150 or 450, because in 2030, it's still going to be way higher than that. And so, I just loved that frame on what your stock is like. You don't have, he disambiguated, you don't have cash and stock. Like, you gave your cash to Tesla, and now what you own is a share of the company. You are an owner of the company. And so people think about it kind of in that weird muddled way of, I have this much money of Tesla stock. No, you own X percent of a company. And yes, people are wildly speculating on the value of that company up and down in the short term. But what you own actually didn't change.
Yeah. I find it fascinating too. There's two things there for me. It's like actually there's many things there, like especially the stuff that our friendly Tesla bot shared is it sucks to be in a down market. This is the first down market that I'm a part of since I started investing, but it's not the first time that I've been part of a company that's been down. So Tesla has had insane roller coasters in the past. However, having an entire market that's dictating how a stock performs is a different experience for me. And it's eye-opening because it's like, okay, it doesn't really matter how much better the company is getting. If the market's like, fuck you, you're fucked. That's just what happens. Excuse my French. Sorry if there's any kids watching. It's just how the market works. Sorry. But so that's an interesting takeaway for me. And the parallel that I take from that is, okay, it's that whole uncomfortable nature of learning. You're in a situation where you're learning from being part of these things, and there's so many brilliant lessons to take away from these things, and sort of like parallelize it to like this whole freedom of speech we were talking about, starting businesses. Like there's just so many like overlapping things between things that have a very common sort of like lesson to be given, and the uncomfortable nature of being part of a down market, I think, has so much tremendous value, and sort of paints a picture on how to do things in the future as well. And then the other thing too that I wanted to highlight was when it comes to these down markets, and we're talking about overexposure to Tesla stock. What's interesting to watch is when the sort of weak hand thing keeps being thrown around, it's shaking off the weak hands. It's shaking off the weak hands. The way I think about that, it's the folks that have been overexposed to the story are uncomfortable with the short-term price movements, and then they are correctly exposing themselves to the future of the company. And that might mean selling 50%, that might mean selling 100%, but that's why the stock's going down, because more people are selling than they're buying. But it's that readjustment of overexposure. And the way I've tried to conceptualize that in my head is like, okay, so the market is correctly, Tesla stock specifically, is correctly exposing itself to, or the people that are invested in Tesla are correctly exposing themselves to the company for the long-term success. And that's why eventually you have a U-turn, because now it's properly exposed, and the folks that are in that company are not going to sell under any circumstances. Most of them are, and that's why you'll have more people buying than selling, and that's what causes the stock to go up. So it's a fascinating dynamic for me. And the other thing that pops up to my head is like, okay, so what are the things that can't be done, or are there tools out there that can help people maybe think through it through that lens to right size exposure to these things so that these crazy price movements aren't as psychologically impactful? Because I think in the short term, what ends up happening is if you're psychologically impacted by the price movements, you totally miss out on opportunities because you're in a negative mindset, not in a positive mindset. And then that has a sort of snowballing effect of negativity, right? So I don't know if there's any sort of advice we can give on that, but Hans, since you went off mute, maybe take it from there.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'll take it back to Dave Lee again. He talks about basically compartmentalizing your risk. And I think that's one of the things that is such a great piece of advice in a bear market specifically, that if you have stable income and you have your retirement investment kind of separated out from, so you can feel secure, like I'm taken care of, my family's needs are taken care of, even my future is reasonably well taken care of. And then over here, this is a different bucket that doesn't impact any of that stuff. It doesn't impact my family's ability to eat. It doesn't impact the roof over my head. And it doesn't impact the fact that, I can afford to maintain my standard of living into my old age. Okay, I can take massive amounts of risk with what's left over after that. And it doesn't matter. Psychologically, I can be detached from that volatility and the impact of it. If it's whatever that is for you, if it's 1% of your life savings, if it's 2%, if it's 5%, and you are exposing it to something that has asymmetric upside, then you can, and the price of having exposure to asymmetric upside is volatility. It's going to go up and down. And so if you can compartmentalize that bucket and you're not worried about the fact that it's going to go up and down, and you are giving yourself exposure to that asymmetric upside, that is the thing that can carry you through a bear market. Because like you're saying, Farzad, if you're overexposed, and the way that you're overexposed is, hey, if this thing fails and I can't make my mortgage payment, that's a problem. Especially, and there are lots of things that can, if I lose my job, do I have savings in the bank? Can I maintain, if I had to make a change in my living situation, can I do that? Elon has talked about this in the past. Hey, if I have to go back to couch surfing and eating ramen noodles, I can do that. Right. Even as, he's at zero risk of that at this point in his career, but he was able to even make that level of risk in 2008 with hundreds of millions of dollars on the line. And so he just doesn't necessarily need that level of material things. So that means his ability to separate out the psychological risk is greater than most of us. And so, that's one way that you can do this for yourself, is say, how do I just cut out all the stuff that doesn't add value to my life? And okay, now everything that's left over after like this tiny amount of needs, great. And we've seen people who've made huge bets in that way be incredibly successful, but sometimes they're not successful, and sometimes they do have to just go back and live on whatever that minimum subsistence thing is. And so you just have to know that for yourself. What do I need to live? Make sure that's taken care of first. If you need to focus on increasing your earnings potential, get a bigger shovel, like Dave Ramsey would say, so that you can still have some left over. Do that, because when a bear market comes, it will expose how much exposure you have that you didn't realize.
Yeah, that was great. Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, Hans is getting very existential, going very deep. Yeah, I mean, a couple things. So, there's a big just change in risk appetite with the macro, and that's obviously affecting Tesla. And the one thing I want to mention is, for every seller, there is a buyer. So people are still picking it up at these lower prices and stuff like that. It's not like these shares are just sitting out there, kind of, to your analogy, Farzad. The other thing is, like, with that risk appetite change going on right now, you need to think what's going on the next, 3 or so months, till the end of the year and into next year. And there isn't a lot, although we can be super optimistic about robotaxi optimists and all these other things. Like, there's not really anything that's going to hit top line or bottom line revenue in the immediate future, even like 6 months out. Once you start seeing more deliveries of like Cybertruck in next year, now that tooling's done, I mean, really it's just ramps right now, and everybody can forecast out what these ramps are going to look like down the road. But that's really it that's going to change in the short term.
Yeah.
I was going to say there may be a catalyst. The catalyst might be January when we get fourth quarter deliveries, and fourth quarter deliveries are good. That would be probably a positive catalyst. But I was going to say is, in the short term, if you have options or you're trading short term, you have justification for being anxious and nervous. If you're long term, and long term 5 years or whatever out plus, then kind of the way I would look at it, and somebody mentioned this to me, and I thought it was like brilliant. If you're really sold on something and you have the opportunity to get that, to go to a store and find something that you really want and buy it 50% off, you would be speeding to the store. And for some reason, even though we all love Tesla stock and we can get it cheap, we don't appreciate the gift that it's presenting to us at that time. And, hopefully you have money to buy, but ultimately, if you love the stock, you love it more at 50% off.
Yeah. That's very fair. And I think for the folks that aren't able to capitalize on that is like kind of a bummer. Like, for example, for me, I have all my shares are 100% in Tesla. My income versus like my standard of living is like even, and I'm not willing to sacrifice my standard of living to buy more shares because I'm happy. I'm happy where I'm at, right? So for me, I'm just letting it ride. But if at some point I'm like, you know what, shit, I should really figure out how to get more, then I'm going to increase my shovel and I'm just going to get more. I'll figure out how to increase my income. I'll do so in the best way that I can, and I'll just buy more, right? But I think that the overexposure aspect, like if I'm trying to put myself in the head of somebody that's maybe in a place where they don't have that income, or the income is sort of level, they have their Tesla stock, but they're depending on the Tesla stock to keep their standard of living, that's when it becomes, that's when you've sabotaged yourself. Because you're mentally, you're in it for the long term, but financially you're not, because you're dependent on that stock. And I have been like that in the past. And that's why I can say with confidence, that's what happens, because I've learned from that, So that's just another variable. It's like, make sure that those things are aligned, that you're not lying to yourself. Be very frank with yourself. Am I being honest with how I'm investing? Because if you're not, then you're going to sabotage yourself. You just are. And I've done that in the past. That's why I can say, I can speak from experience, but wasn't sure if somebody came off mute. There you go.
I was going to say is that just you have to be careful. Like there's a psychological concept Don't let fear make a decision for you. Everybody's fearful. Everybody hates this, but don't let that be the decision making for you. Kind of fight through it and kind of make a rational decision.
Right.
Yeah, and one of the other way I like to think about it is like, when you're investing, I like others who have said, when you invest in Tesla, it's just like you put it away and you forget about it. You think about that 5 years from now. But what dollar per contribution to the world, what is that value you see in Tesla? Obviously, Apple has had this incredible contribution in the world of putting a smartphone in everyone's hand, and creating good user experience around that. I think what Tesla has done to get electric vehicles to market and change the mix in the market is incredible. But then look at what they're going to be doing down the road as well, and that's kind of where your investment is going to. So
Yeah.
we all don't sound like greedy people, just trying to get an ROI.
No, those are great points. Great. I hope that was helpful for everybody. I mean, I think we were just that was helpful for me too, to like reframe how I sort of think through my investment thesis, and if there was advice I could give. But thank you all for being so open and honest about that. Maybe to close it up, we want to talk about Andrej Karpathy's sort of talk with Lex. Jared, I know that's one thing you want to talk about. Go ahead and kick us off, my friend.
Oh, that was so good. That whole podcast. I mean, 3.5 hours. It's long, but it's worth every minute. And it's really cool to see Andrej talk. We've heard him at AI Day, but I don't know that I've seen. This might have been the first, long length interview I've seen with him. But I mean, my biggest takeaway was that just AI is so early, with how he's talking about, just centuries to go and the levels of AI. And I think it definitely played the desires of every like inner nerd out there of like, what if there's glitches in life and reality, and when AI can find glitches? I mean, it was every nerd's fantasy there. So that was pretty cool. But it was really nice. Obviously the one big headline was that he would consider an Act 2 at Tesla, and hearing how far Tesla AI has come from those days of just having a couple people coding at their desk, to Dojo and where it is now. So, I mean, like I said, worth every second, and just incredible insight to hear a different perspective in Tesla AI.
Mm-hmm.
I tried listening to it, and I'm like, I'm about halfway through. I realize how dumb I am and how smart he is, and how positive I think he is on Tesla. That was kind of like the overreaching thing. I was really impressed, favorably impressed, and how at ease he is with the subject matter. He's a super bright guy, so I was really impressed by whatever I understood.
Yeah, I was impressed in a number of ways. One of the things was that just him talking about what he's grown the FSD team into, that, it started out 2 guys coding neural nets that were so small that they could run on desktop PCs that were running literally under their desks, all the way to 1,000+ person team. And, he said the reason that he quit was he had elevated to a level where all of his day-to-day responsibilities were managerial responsibilities, and he wasn't able to get down into the code and actually do anything. Like, he was no longer working on AI. He was just working on managing a team. And for a technical person, that is no fun. I can relate. I was doing a management type role. Now, I'm not nearly as technical or smart as Mr. Andrej, but it just wore on me. I hated dealing with all the people things. Like, how do we motivate people? Oh, people are fighting. This person has their feelings hurt. Oh, now we've got this round of gossip that's going around. I doubt that those were some of the issues that he was dealing with. The Tesla team is such a good team that probably wasn't as much of what he was doing, but still, just all the overhead of management, it gets old. And if you're not a people person that loves dealing with people problems, then that's not something that's fun. So the fact that he was able to create such a large and effective team as someone who doesn't even enjoy doing that was super impressive. And then also understandable why he wanted to back away, and why he's willing to come back if he can come back in a capacity. Like, there's not really a good road to transition from that high level management back into something that's technical, that really works within, like, you kind of do need a clean break and then a clean restart if you're going to do something like that. So that was cool. And then I really enjoyed the part where he talked about Optimus, like when Elon said, okay, Optimus is going to be a thing. And then we got Andrej's perspective on the Joe Justice Agile, like, okay, this is a thing. Now people are just going to swarm it. And like anyone who's interested in this problem can come and work on it and start making contributions. And it will be this self-organizing thing inside of the company. And, you know, maybe we're going to create some actual metrics and measurement and organization within the digital self-management tools that we have to help direct that. And then, so that tied with Andrej talking about Elon's ability to combat entropy in an organization. And I was kind of putting those two things together. I'm like, how much of combating entropy has to do with allowing this initiative to be a self-organizing initiative where the people who are the most passionate and the most not, like, you may be passionate about Tesla bot, but if you work at Tesla and you think Optimus is the coolest thing in the world, but you feel like, well, I literally don't have anything that I can contribute to that project, you're not going to go stand over there, because you're going to go stand over there. You're not going to do anything. Your little phone's going to ding at you. Hey, stop being a drag on company resource. You're going to go do something else. Whereas the people who love it, want to see it succeed, have great ideas, and feel like they can make a contribution, showing up to that specific thing every day, putting in the work, and then this little team of people kind of coalesces and gels and starts to make progress. If you have so you have that with the bot, and then you have that with, you know, every other little thing inside of Tesla, and you don't have all this overhead of meetings. Like, that is an incredible way to fight ineffective use of company resources and to make incredible progress on really technically difficult problems that are going to bring tremendous value to the world.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jared.
So the one thing that I really liked that he mentioned was that Tesla is kind of just an umbrella of startups, and that Tesla's been able to maintain the startup mentality, even given how big of a company they are. I think they're over 100,000 employees now. I didn't have a ton of takeaways from that specific line, but I didn't know if you guys had anything. I've just been trying to ponder it. You know, what are the implications about the business profile of Tesla being such a massive, influential startup, on their contributions to the world, and just the speed at which they can move, kind of all that? Did you guys have any thoughts on that?
They can do anything. That's honestly, that's my biggest takeaway. I mean, you probably saw this too, Jared, when you worked at Tesla, right? I mean, what's Tesla incredibly good at is hiring problem solvers. And problem solving is, you can use problem solving in any field. All you have to do is just learn it. And then what do problem solvers do? They problem solve how to learn something. It's like the core skill set that is needed for everything is problem solving. And that's why Tesla's doing all the things that they're doing. I mean, and that Ron Barron conference, he himself said, I can't keep up with all the shit that you do, because Tesla's not a car company. It has everything. So over time, if you keep bringing in talent that is incredibly talented, and they are problem solvers first, and you're incentivized to vertically integrate. Another thing he said at the meeting was that they're going to get into mining. I forgot to say that Tesla was going to get into mining. If really the incentive for everybody is to vertically integrate everything, and we have to problem solve our way up that vertical integration, at some point, if you do enough things, you're going to solve everything. You know, you're going to get your hand into different things over time. So that's the implication for me. It's that over the next 10, 15 years, Tesla's just going to be a conglomerate of manufacturing. And what are they going to manufacture? I don't know. It's going to be a lot of different things. They're going to be manufacturing the thing that's going to manufacture things in the Tesla bot. It's wild. It's completely insane. It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. The takeaway from me from the Andrej discussion is that even under that culture of innovation and people flocking to the problems and sort of maximizing the flow of information to solve problems. Why did Andrej leave at the end? It was still because he got into a role that was quote unquote managerial. There's still a people thing that's part of Tesla at some level. It is super engineering, it is super scientific, but at the same time, it's people working there. So over time, what happens is those leaders that have ability as a leader and as a person that's in there dealing with people, they're going to flock. They're going to eventually rise to that standpoint, but then it ends up being, okay, well, this is not what I want to do. I want to sort of go to the next thing, right? And the variable that's still there that it seems like Tesla has figured out in some way is how do we solve for that, for the people, for ensuring that we attract the best possible leaders, for ensuring that the people that go into leadership positions, they stay for as long as humanly possible. I have a theory that, and this is sort of like a little bit of a tangent, but kind of goes along the same lines because this is what came up to my head. The one thing that I've noticed is that in those positions where people are leaders and they're, getting to Andrej's level and then saying, you know what, I wanted to do more technical stuff. From my experience, I find that women are very good in those roles, very good in those roles. And what I've seen starting to happen is that women that have a science background or a STEM research background that have technical ability, in my opinion, they're automatically going to be better at the people aspect of it because women just are. Women just are. When I was working at Tesla, our entire leadership group at the facility was women. It was like myself, Greg, and then we had Nancy, Shayla, Liz, and a bunch of other people, but it was mostly women led. And it was so interesting for me to watch how like the different sexes sort of like approach problems, and men are much more like thing focused and women are much more people focused. But like the ultimate killer is a woman with a technical background. And I think that's why Gwen Shotwell is at SpaceX. And that's why she's been there for so long. And SpaceX is fucking killing it. It's because they have her. And so that's one of my very weird takeaways that I had from the discussion, the Andrej discussion was like, okay, wow. So that's like another reinforcement for me is like, Gwen's been at SpaceX for how long? Like 10, 15 years. And she's rocking it at that point, but she needs to know the technical stuff. You can't be a rocket COO unless you understand the technicals, but she's obviously a great people leader as well. I just want to throw that out there because I don't think it gets talked about enough. Like women in technical fields have an advantage and they should be celebrated for that. And we should put them in those positions, like get them in there, not because, we need more women in leadership. No, because they're just fucking better at it. On average, they are. So how do we get them in those situations? Sorry, I was a little bit of a rant.
I think Tesla bot should be female, by the way, in my opinion.
Of course you would go there.
I was going to say is that one advantage we have, though, during this time is the same advantage we have during COVID. Whereas everybody's kind of slowing down, the only company that's really hiring engineers right now is Tesla. Everybody else is kind of like stopped or laying off. And people are going to start to recede in their spending. Their R&D spending is going to decrease just if there's a recession. That's what's going to happen. And Tesla's doing the opposite. So whereby everybody, and it happened with obviously in the EVs, everybody kind of stopped and struggled, and Tesla expanded their lead. And I would expect the same thing to happen over the next couple of years. People will be kind of stuck in the sand, and Tesla will be spending money and advancing, the technology. And all that can do is advance the lead they have in not only EVs, but robotics and AI and all the other subcategories.
Yeah, I love that point because basically engineering talent is on sale right now. There's going to be people like talent that was not available previously that's now going to be available. And then also just the market clearing price for acquiring them is going to be lower. And so that will be a great boon for those that are actually able, have some dry powder on the side and are able to start investing that way right now. I wanted to go back just for a second to tying the startup inside of Tesla comment that you made, Jared. So I think that what he was saying is basically the same thing that I was referencing, where it's that self-organizing principle. Like if you give Tesla employees the ability to, oh, here's an idea, Tesla employees can generate ideas about the things that they want to start working on. Now I think there's a little bit different gravitas when Elon's like, okay, this is a new thing that we're going to start working on. That will probably get a lot more organizational attention with inside of Tesla than something that a person, especially if they're lower on the totem pole, might bring to the table. But that doesn't mean that that can't get traction. But you have an environment where anyone can have a great idea, and then other employees in the company can latch onto that idea and contribute their time, energy, and attention to it and start working on it, trying to move it forward. And so that is the startup, is the ability to say, hey, this is something that we want to work on. Okay, we're going to try and make progress on it. If it contributes to the company, great, we'll keep going forward. And if it doesn't, okay, we'll just go back to working on the other things. And so they've created, basically it's like a startup accelerator, like a company that is a startup accelerator. And so, disruption theory is kind of canonical within Silicon Valley. How does it work? And people like Clayton Christensen will say, well, hey, it always happens from the periphery. Even, Tony Seba talks about this. Disruption happens from the outside. It happens from the periphery. It doesn't happen by incumbents. And the reason for that is just a structural thing, that big companies need big wins in order to make moves on their balance sheet and their P&L. And the opportunities for startups are so small compared to what a big company needs, that they're just not going to pursue those things. And the big companies are going to listen to their existing customers who have different needs than the people who need the new technology. And so it'll go on an S curve that they didn't start out on it, and then they can't catch it as it's ramping. What Tesla's doing by creating the startup culture inside of the company is that they are literally an inside out disruption factory, instead of a lot of current incumbents that are just waiting for an outside in disruption. And so, we see this already with the way that Tesla works, that they're disrupting their current products. The Model S disrupts the Roadster. The Model 3 disrupts the Model S to a certain extent. And then the robo-taxi is going to disrupt a lot of previous business. That they have the ability. And so, as far as a long-term investor is concerned, I love the thought of holding onto a company for 50 years that is constantly on the bleeding edge of disruption in a way that we've never really seen a Silicon Valley company be able to, because, there's that Lindy effect. The half-life of what it took to get you to the scale that you're at is probably the amount of time that it could take you to fall from the peak down to the valley of death. And so if Tesla is able to maintain this culture, especially once Elon departs, of inside out disruption, then they have the possibility to survive over a different type of time scale than companies that get beholden to all the internal politics and the way that existing companies operate. You've got to figure out, how do you manage communication over large groups of people so that you can coordinate? And now I've got all this process and all this documentation, and that's just the natural progression of things. And we'll see, how it turns out, but this is a really interesting counterexample to, maybe there's a way that we can, like you're saying, a hack in the way that the world works. Maybe this is one of those hacks in the nature of human interactions and cooperation that we haven't really discovered before.
Yeah, the one other interesting thing I was thinking about with regards to kind of, what you're just speaking on, as well as FSD, and going back to Andrej's discussion, was how they were talking about, you don't know what problems you're going to face until you run into them exploring FSD and AI, because it's not like anyone has done FSD before. Nobody has completed what a fully self-driving car looks like, the functions, the form, everything like that. So they've just been running into that for years now. But it's interesting, speaking on disruption, that they're exploring Optimus, more broadly, because it's almost like they're not saying FSD is done, but I think it's well priced into the new price of a car at Tesla. And I think they realize the trajectory that they're on, that not necessarily that it's in the bag, but they've got enough resources devoted to AI in the car that they're kind of shifting their focus into what's next as well. They're speculating on where they can take their learnings from FSD into the next product.
And maybe that's why, like Argo, or Ford dumped Argo. Maybe, everybody now knows that FSD is in the bag and it's not worth spending, throwing good money at bad. And ultimately they believe they might be able to license it and get the technology that way. And maybe that's it. Maybe there's no coincidence.
It's a great
I
observation.
think we're kind of touching on. So Dale in the chat asked,
I was just going to bring it
Tesla's
up.
technology impact the poor and most vulnerable in 10 years? And, it's hard to know for sure, but I think the two biggest potential impacts are FSD and Tesla Bot. And if you understand the concept of elasticity of demand, Tesla Bot will be able to do labor at a cost that is significantly lower, than existing human labor. And so we'll be able to create products at low price point, like incredible products at incredibly low price points in the future that are not possible with business models that exist today. And then, with FSD, if we get to robotaxis, the price per mile to transport people and goods collapses. So both of those two deflationary technologies have the potential to make incredible goods and services accessible to literally the poorest people on earth. Now, I think this is going to take a lot longer than 10 years to play out, but that is the type of potential impact that Tesla can have on the world's poor.
Took the words right out of my mouth. Great question. Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah,
It was also funny.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say it was kind of funny also to hear the contrast between Andrej as well as Elon in terms of timelines. You heard Andrej, I think he was speaking on Optimus, and I'm not taking it word for word here, but he said something of Optimus, general AI is not going to be done for another 10 plus years or something like that. I was just like, Elon would never say anything is 10 plus years away, I feel like.
Andrej's lucky. He's benefiting from not being on the payroll. He can say stuff like that.
I was going to say, obviously, I think it reduces transportation costs, but ultimately, if Optimus is efficient and it raises GDPs for all countries in a dramatic fashion, theoretically, it's going to be tough to have poverty. Theoretically, you're going to have so much wealth that not that there's not going to be classes, but I would think that the lowest levels will be higher than they would have been before. And the government will be able to implement programs to train, provide living amenities, etc. Just because there will be such a immense amount of profit.
The thing that I've now been struggling with, and this sort of my thinking has evolved over time on this topic, is that as things that we once thought were very pricey and tough to pay for. So for example, housing, food, shelter, basic needs like utilities, internet, some form of entertainment. Right now, for us to be able to do that for everybody, it's going to be multiple thousands of dollars per month, at least. If we get to a point where, because the transportation costs and manufacturing costs come down, say, an order of magnitude or more, and instead of thousands of dollars a month, it's only hundreds of dollars a month, then that theoretically dramatically increases the pool of people that can now feel like most of us feel today. Let's just use that as an example. However, over time, what I've sort of observed, and this I've observed this of my own mind, and this is maybe I'm projecting my own mind, is once you get to a point where you yourself feel like I have everything I need, your mind still goes to, but what if I'm able to do this? And what if I'm able to do that? And what about that cool new thing, right? And I've tried to train my mind to say, well, dude, like, but honestly, look at yourself versus everybody else, especially globally. Like, come on, don't be an idiot. Like, literally, you have everything you need, and make it a life of passion, But I think it's human nature to, and I think that's why we progress so much, to be comfortable with where you are, and then view the current as well, we've always have this. Why can't we go further? Why can't all of us have the next thing? And then that's where it gets a little hazy, because unless that technology is able to produce those bigger and better things that folks right now view are like incredulous, like why would you ever think about everybody having access to that? To now 10 to 20 years in advance, and people are going to be like, yeah, but what about that thing? But yeah, everybody has a house, everybody has water, everybody has this, everybody has internet, of course. But it's a human right to have a helicopter. I don't freaking know. Like, what happens then?
Yeah, so there's two important metrics. One of them is the baseline, like what is the minimum that everyone has? But then the other metric is, okay, and then what's the spread, like the disparity between the person that has the least and the person that has the most? And then what's the distribution of how many people have a lot and then how many people have more towards the minimum? And this has kind of been consistent over time, that the people with the most relative to the people with the least ends up concentrating in a few hands. And I think that's a function of life is really hard for a whole number of reasons. And whether it's luck or skill or confluence of, like, it takes a pretty rare combination of both luck and skill and timing and background to achieve high levels of success and wealth, whether for positive or negative reasons. And so that is the exception, not the rule. I think that's why we end up seeing that disparity. But that will continue to, I think, perpetuate into the future. Even as we have a whole lot of stuff, there's always going to be someone who has more stuff. And even if the stuff that we're looking at changes, because, okay, everyone has, we'll use your helicopter example, everyone has access to riding on a super safe helicopter. Well, okay, now maybe what I'm looking at as the measuring stick about how well I'm doing relative to other people will change. So anytime you get a lot of people with not, closer to the baseline, and then a few people with a lot, that's going to be a time of social upheaval. And I think that is one of the things that we're looking at as we make this transition. And that part is scary. So, yeah, you can raise the minimum standard of living to a pretty high level. And if you don't make sure that people feel like society is fair and equitable, you can still be in a world of hurt.
So it's the gap. The gap is really the most important thing here. So the haves versus the have-nots, if that gap is way too large and you have a sort of like a threshold number of people that are in the have-nots, that's when shit gets crazy. As it should.
Especially as the gap gets bigger and bigger between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
I prefer Levi's, not the Gap myself. But the other part would be that if money is more prevalent and technology improves, life expectancy probably extends also, and so people are going to be around longer, which adds another component, another interesting component. And I always, what I would expect is you'd create a bunch of more people that are explorers. They'd get satiated and they'd want to either leave the planet, like Elon, or go explore the ocean or elsewhere. And I think it's going to create a whole new class of explorers that will further advance technology.
Yeah, it's interesting. there's never, when you talk about the gap and stuff like that, the first thing I thought of is like, well, we never had a time where that gap has been shortening. It's always been lengthening over time. I can't think of a time where it's been shortening. So there are definitely going to be societal consequences of that, but I hope the benefits outweigh those consequences.
Yeah. Mimi makes a great point too. Like, stuff doesn't make you happy. I think ultimately that's correct, but most people don't know that because they haven't been able to experience stuff not making them happy. And I think as a society, we crave stuff, but it's not until you get the stuff that that it's not the stuff. And that was a lesson I learned. It's like, yeah, I want the cars, I want the clothes, I want the jewelry, I want the blah. Then I'm like, well, this shit's a waste of my freaking money. Like, I'm not happy. I got a short, dopamine hit. Oh my God, look at me. I'm so cool. And then I'm like, no, the fuck I'm not. I'm kind of a loser. This is not what you're really alive for, I think the more people get to experience that, and maybe that's like the age of abundance. Maybe that's like the enlightening. Everybody has access to everything. And then everybody's like, well, it's not the everything, it's the experience. It's the being alive and having conversations and being around family and friends and touching grass. And, I sound like I'm on mushrooms right now, but like all these like thinking about the existential nature of our species and what we can do to make it better. And I think that's ultimately what I think makes humans really happy, but you have to get to that point, and if you're stuck on a 9-to-5 with 3 kids and you're, arguing with your wife and you're having a tough sort of life where you're trying to make it better for yourself and your kids, but it's taking years off your life and you're stressed out, you're not going to think about, okay, what really makes me happy? You're trying to deal with your everyday, So if we're able to free up the time for people to sit down and actually contemplate why they're alive, I think that equation changes, but that's going to take the most work that's ever taken in the history of mankind, I think. Yeah. All right. Any parting thoughts? Maybe we should wrap it up here. What do y'all think? I see everybody on mute. I'll take that as a let's go. All right. Any predictions for college football? That's how we ended it last time. I know we got a couple of us have to go soon. So I know we got Georgia, Tennessee. We got who's Oregon playing this weekend? Do they have a bye? I forget.
I should probably take that hat down. I don't even know.
Fair weather fan.
I think they're playing. No, I'm a longtime fan. I just haven't been into college football recently.
Colorado.
Okay, yeah. So Oregon.
I think
will
Oregon's
destroy
playing
Colorado.
Little Sisters of the Four.
Yeah.
1-7.
Yeah,
You better.
I'm from Colorado, and Oregon is definitely going to destroy Colorado.
UCLA is playing Arizona State.
Okay. So UCLA is going to win. Is Arizona State good this year?
No.
Okay. So you guys should win, right? UCLA, number 12 team. Oh, yeah, you guys should. UCLA is favored by 11. Jarrett, you're Ohio State guy, so I'm just going to ignore you. Let's see. I'm just kidding. Who's Ohio State playing this weekend? Northwestern? Yeah, that's like OSU's favorite 38. Georgia, Tennessee. In the chat, for those that follow college football, what do y'all think? Who wins it? This one's intriguing for me because UGA is favorite 8.5. I don't think so, man. I think Tennessee has a chance to win this one. What do you guys think?
It's at Georgia, though, right?
It is at Georgia, yeah.
Yeah, so I like Georgia.
Okay, simple enough. What about you, Hans? Do you have a take on this?
The SEC is fun, and so I think Georgia could totally get taken out at home by Tennessee.
Okay, Jared, do you have a take on Georgia, Tennessee?
I don't really have a take. Go Buckeyes.
There you go. What a bastard. I think so. I don't know who Georgia has played this year that's actually legitimately a good team. If I look at their schedule, Oregon, but that was the first game of the season. You usually don't take a lot away from that. Samford, South Carolina, Kent State, Missouri, Auburn, Vanderbilt, Florida. These aren't like the greatest teams. Of course, they've taken care of business. But like Kent State, they struggled. They almost lost to Missouri, and Missouri is not very good. And now they got freaking Tennessee that's riding a gigantic wave going into their house. One of my best friends is a huge Georgia fan, and I hope he's watching this. I'm taking Tennessee. I think they win by field goal. You heard it here first. Georgia goes down. Tennessee proves that they're number one. and I hope Ohio State loses to Northwestern. I'm just kidding. I'm still sour about last week. Go ahead.
If you want to put some money on it, Farzad, I'm
Hell
open
no.
to it.
I'm trying to buy more Tesla stock.
Put some
Bro.
Tesla shares on the line.
No. I'm trying to amass more. I'm not confident about that pick.
I think Georgia's going to beat him up. Let's play for 100 shares of Tesla. All right, got it.
Good night, everybody. Hell no, those are mine. All right, thank you all very much. That was an awesome discussion. Thank you all the panel for being so open, and I thought that was we touched so many different subjects, and for me, it was incredibly rewarding to have the chance to sit down with y'all to discuss this live. So thank you guys very, very much. Thank you everybody in the chat for following along. Thank you so much for supporting. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing, and thank you for supporting the channel. Any parting words from the panel before we head off? Oh.
It's an honor to be here with you, gentlemen.
Everybody have a good weekend and be well.
Thank you. All right.
Go Buckeyes.
This guy and his Buckeyes. All right, everybody. See ya. See you next week. Actually, see you at 3:30 Central. I'm going to be live with James Dalma, Scott, and Dr. Know-It-All. So I'm excited for that one in about 2 hours. I hope my brain can keep up. See you guys later. Bye-bye. And broadcast.